Okay.
If you don't check in between your toes, I'm gonna have someone in the editing department do it for you. Relax in your favorite easy chair, put up those clean feet, and join us for another episode of DISCOG Swims, our series where we cover the careers of choice artists and dive into their discographies. All easily digestible and perfect for a dip in the pool. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. You already know we cover artists that typically have 5 albums or fewer. But what about musicians that have only 1 official studio album recorded and released? This week, we'll be visiting the discography of singer-songwriter and guitarist Jackson C. Frank, a folk artist whose career was cut far too short. Only releasing 1 self-titled album in 1965, Frank has nevertheless been cited as highly influential and hugely inspiring, with contemporaries like Paul Simon and Nick Drake popularizing his sound. Known for his bluesy guitar playing, ethereal voice, and haunting imagery behind the lyrics, Jackson C. Frank not only managed to build a legacy on a very short run, but was able to do that off the back of a single album. Mr. Frank might not be a singer-songwriter you've heard of before, and there's plenty of reasons for that. Industry practices and distribution challenges aside, Jackson C. Frank suffered personal tragedies early in life, and dealt with mental health issues that would plague him to the end of his days. While we're mainly going to swim through his only studio album, we'll also take some time to explore Frank's personal life in order to put his music and legacy into context. A lot of us have wondered what happened. How did a promising 60s folk singer with serious blues playing and lyrical chops end up in such a fall from grace? Even if many musicians know him well, why is he not a brighter star among icons like Bob Dylan or John Mayer? While everyone's careers and struggles are different, we'll still take a closer look at why Jackson C. Frank likely didn't achieve greater success. But it won't be all bad. We've got an excellent album to check out, and a wonderful artist to explore in full. Don't forget your poolside beverage and a pair of sunglasses. Come swim with us into the deep blue world of Jackson C. Frank. It's only fair that we start this towards the beginning, right? Jackson Carey Jones was born on March 2nd, 1943, in Buffalo, New York. The only child of Marilyn and Jack Jones, Jackson later took the last name Frank after his stepfather, an officer in the U.S. Army. Normally, I'd provide a little bit more backstory before jumping into the music, but one event in particular really shaped Frank's life more than anything. On March 31st, 1954, a few weeks after his 11th birthday, Jackson C. Frank's elementary school, the Cleveland Hill School, caught fire in a sudden disaster. 15 of Frank's fellow students perished during the tragedy, while nearly 20 students, including Frank, survived with serious burns and injuries. While the cause was never determined, it's thought that a furnace exploded and caused a fiery blast that spread throughout the building. Like I mentioned, Frank did survive the disaster, but with severe burns covering more than half his body, requiring him to live in the local hospital for nearly a year. Lifelong problems that would affect him would also include a limp, joint issues, and an uneven posture. It's clear that mental and psychological issues would remain with Frank after such a terrifying and unexpected tragedy, and we'll revisit some of this when it becomes more pertinent later. During his time in the hospital, an old teacher of Jackson C. Frank brought him an acoustic guitar to keep him occupied. This is where Frank would begin his musical journey, honing his guitar playing skills and a beautiful tenor voice over the next decade. While he was there, Frank received an autograph and card from Elvis Presley after the singer became aware of the fire. A short time later, in 1957, during a vacation with his mother, both of them met Vernon Presley completely by chance outside of Graceland, eventually getting to meet Elvis in person and being welcomed inside his home. This would all undoubtedly influence Frank further, who cited Elvis as a favorite before and during his career. As Frank entered high school and explored new interests such as journalism, he found his own passion for music growing as well, and began performing covers and original songs at coffee houses, art galleries, and open mic nights. Because our guy, Mr. Frank, like a lot of the greats, suffered from severe stage fright, he came up with creative solutions to get past it. Roy Orbison famously wore dark sunglasses throughout his career to help with his anxiety, and George Jones was known to get pretty juiced up in order to get through a single show. I'm not one of the greats, but I kind of know what this feeling is like. It's part of why I perform so rarely, if at all. Mr. Frank would get over this issue by incorporating comedy into his set, including a bit where he would argue with his microphone. As our guy became more more confident over time, he'd branch out to other musical opportunities in his immediate zone. Enrolling at Gettysburg College to study journalism in 1961, he befriended other musicians to play folk covers and originals for the college radio station. The only problem was college didn't really stick for our guy. After not much more than a semester, he flunked out, and shortly afterwards received an insurance payout of over $100,000 from his childhood tragedy. You could say that Mr. Frank didn't have much reason to go back to school. One thing you should realize is that $100,000 was equivalent to around $1 million in the early to mid-60s. Frank spent his money with reckless abandon, mainly collecting cars and visiting clubs in the Toronto area with his then friend John Kay, who would later front the group Steppenwolf. In 1965, Jackson C. Frank decides to move to the United Kingdom, hoping to immerse himself in the burgeoning folk scene. While Frank wouldn't quite reach the career longevity of Bob Dylan or Paul Simon, and certainly not the album sales of Donovan, the Beatles, or Pete Seeger, 1965 would prove to be a pivotal year for our guy, and it should be easy to understand why this was. Before we dive into the record, we need to revisit somebody whose name was mentioned a few times already. Paul Simon is a singer-songwriter from the popular duo Simon and Garfunkel. The early 60s weren't really kind to them at first, with their debut record flopping in the United States, and Simon deciding to move to England in 1965 to learn some new styles for the guitar. He'd explore the bohemian folk neighborhoods and hopefully find new inspiration for the duo along the way. He did end up finding inspiration for himself, recording the Paul Simon songbook that year, featuring only Simon on vocals and guitar. While in England, Simon would run into another folk musician who we've become quite acquainted with. Jackson C. Frank would befriend and explore musical ideas with Paul Simon, leading to an opportunity for Frank to record an album with Simon acting as producer. During these sessions in 1965, other musicians would visit to see the new artist that Paul Simon had discovered. Singer-songwriter Al Stewart contributed very occasional guitar and arranging duties. And Art Garfunkel, you know this guy, was there as well, likely for moral support. Moral support or not, Frank's stage fright usually got the better of him, and in order to record properly with Simon, Garfunkel, and Stewart in attendance, completed his takes surrounded by several screens to obscure him from view. The final result was Jackson C. Frank in 1965, the artist's self-titled debut record, recorded and released in the United Kingdom. Unfortunately, due to our guy not yet cracking the mainstream, the album sold in very low numbers, and contemporary reviews from critics are hard to find. Retrospective looks paint a greater picture for us. Atwood magazine called it one of folk's most brilliant and forgotten records. Sputnik Music referred to the album as spare, minimalist, bluesy, despondent, and most importantly, raw as hell. And if you've been to the Steve Hoffman music forums, it's been labeled as one of the greatest folk albums ever. To be completely honest with you, it would take hours, possibly longer, to comb through all the reviews that praised this album. Modern critics and popular artists commonly recognize it as a landmark effort. You know how this goes, though. It's what's on tape that really counts. Opening Jackson C. Frank's self-titled album is the song Blues Run the Game. Not only his most popular song out of the whole bunch, but probably the track that best represents his legacy. A bluesy and sparse number with several verses and simple, clever wordplay, Blues Run the Game has been covered by contemporaries like our old friends Simon and Garfunkel, Nick Drake, and Burt Jansch, but also more modern artists like guitarist John Mayer, the group Counting Crows, and even Mark Lanigan from Queens of the Stone Age and the Screaming Trees. Everyone who knows this album in full appreciates the song, but you'll meet many who say it's their favorite of Frank's by far. Next up is Don't Look Back, a song with a slightly more aggressive playing style and lyrical references to war and conflict. You can tell Frank's high school days of studying history and journalism really paid off, and the resulting sound is very close to earlier Dylan. Kimby is actually a cover, adapted from the folk song I Wish I Was a Mole in the Ground by Appalachian legend Bascom Lamar Lunsford. It's very sweet and tunefully sung, and it returns to Frank's signature plucking style on the guitar. Deceptively surreal, it's been sampled from Bob Dylan's mid-60s output to author Salman Rushdie. Yellow Walls is right up there with Frank's most well-known material, due in part to its lyrical content. The track is one of the few that directly reference the 1954 Cleveland Hill Fire, with the wordplay describing Frank's hospital room and nearly year-long stay in haunting detail. It also features our old friend Al Stewart assisting on the guitar. Closing out side A, Here Come the Blues lives up to its name with a characteristic shuffle. While the melodies and riffs seem to predate later ideas from Randy Newman, the lyrics are much darker, likely influencing folk artists like Nick Drake and later rock stars such as Robert Smith. Flipping over the record, we come to Milk and Honey, another song popular with fans of Mr. Frank and beyond. If you're wondering how much of an effect Mr. Paul Simon had on our guy, this track lends itself well to his producing style and ear for arrangements. Also, if you're a cinema lover like me, it's possible you know the song from Vincent Gallo's movie The Brown Bunny from 2003, where Milk and Honey is featured prominently in the soundtrack, as well as early trailers for the film. My Name is Carnival shows up next in the sequence, with a style that could be described as loosely upbeat or cautiously beautiful. Frank once again goes for darkness lyrically, but plays his guitar with a buoyancy that could rival even Donovan.
Donovan! Who's this Donovan?
Coming up after that is a track that sometimes goes by the name Dialogue, I Want to Be Alone, and alternately I Want to Be Alone, Dialogue. This has happened to you before, right? Whatever its title, it remains one of Frank's most beautiful songs, featuring his hallmark guitar plucking, clear and tuneful voice, and a simple style produced by Simon. It was not only the first song of Frank's that I heard years ago, but it's still a favorite of mine even today. Another surprising cinema connection is actually the group Daft Punk, who used this track in their own 2006 sci-fi movie, Daft Punk's Electroma. It's a bold choice, but we respect it, I'm sure. Just Like Anything might be the most Nick Drake adjacent tune on the album. Surreal depictions of life and death feature heavily in the wordplay, while Frank's natural rhythmic sense and sparse riffs tie it all together. Closing out the record in full is You Never Wanted Me, a sweet, serene love song with lyrics as mysterious and murky as they are gentle. Musically, the chords and the key are not all that far from where we started, because if we looped the album on repeat, Blues Run the Game would flow strikingly well right after this. Now this would be the end of Jackson C. Frank's debut record, as it was released in 1965. However, a handful of songs produced during those sessions are still worth mentioning. Marcy's Song, The Visit, and Relations all feature Frank's surreal lyrics and unique approach to the guitar, but they wax even more poetic than a few of the tracks I talked about earlier. This is not to say that Frank left out his best lyrics, but it does make us wonder why these songs weren't finished or included for release back in 1965. Prima Donna of Swans has some of our guy's most abstract lyrics, as well as some of his higher sung notes. A song like this really makes you appreciate the musical skill Mr. Frank had during his peak, nearly becoming a Paul Simon of his own. The last song we'll visit is Marlene, a track that not only haunts us listeners through and through, but likely haunted Jackson C. Frank throughout his life. If you remember our discussion on the Cleveland Hill fire, 15 students were killed in the tragedy as Frank and others managed to escape. Frank's schoolmate and girlfriend, Marlene DuPont, was one of those who sadly perished. She is not only remembered in the title of this song, but also by Frank much later, who had intended to name his next album after her. There's something else sad that we should mention. Despite this record managing to amaze and astound listeners today, there never would be a next album. No follow-up to Jackson C. Frank. So, the title of this segment maybe looks a little bit grim. I'll admit, this is normally the part where we'd talk about Jackson C. Frank today. This will be different for us though, and it's possible we'll take this approach with some discographies we check out in the future. I won't hold back here. Jackson C. Frank unfortunately gave up the ghost in 1999, but even if an artist that we feature on the TV channel passes away, the Today segment we use still fits quite well. We get a respectful opportunity to mention posthumous releases, talk about reunions done in their honor, or other projects they were involved with before the very end. The problem is, Jackson C. Frank has plenty of gaps here. There's not much posthumously to speak of, and his legacy can sometimes be difficult to grasp. Another problem we face is that Mr. Frank had his musical journey abruptly end just as fast as it began. It's safe to say that Jackson C. Frank only had a real career from 1965 to 1966 in total. We'll talk a little bit about why this may have been, and see if we can understand what happened in his final years. Rewinding back to 1966, Jackson C. Frank was doing moderately well in England, and he had built a small following off the back of his first album. It was around this time, unfortunately, that his mental health issues began to grow. Likely remnants of the disaster he faced in childhood, trouble started to build as his money ran out. Psychiatric evaluations proved fruitless, and a case of writer's block hampered his career. After a short visit back to the States, States, Frank returned to England, but no longer had the confidence, mental state, or skill to record new material. Al Stewart, who we mentioned earlier, had this to say. He proceeded to fall apart before our very eyes. His style that everyone loved was melancholy, very tuneful things. He started doing things that were completely impenetrable. They were basically about psychological angst, played at full volume with lots of thrashing. I don't remember a single word of them. It just didn't work. There was one review that said he belonged on a psychologist's couch. Then shortly after that, he hightailed it back to Woodstock, New York again, because he wasn't getting any work. Jackson C. Frank settled back in the US in the late 60s, marrying a woman from England and having 2 children, one of them sadly dying during childbirth. Frank's mental state continued to decline, and he faced even greater problems, such as consuming more drugs, cheating on his wife, and experiencing hallucinations. Further visits to psychiatric hospitals and a separation from his family would soon follow. After a period of couch surfing in the early 70s, a meeting was arranged between Frank and none other than moral supporter Art Garfunkel, who was allegedly going to allow our guy to record the song Juliet. However, a drug-fueled group of Frank and his friends greatly offended Garfunkel, and the talks and the sessions just fell apart. Outside of some unpaid gigs at local fairs and inklings of new songs, Jackson C. Frank began to disappear entirely. He lived with his parents in New York by the 1980s, largely spending his time wandering rural highways. At one point, he attempted to locate Paul Simon again by suddenly traveling to New York City, but this proved a waste of time. In the 1990s, a longtime fan of Frank's, Jim Abbott, became acquainted with the aging, disheveled former folk singer. He recalled this. When I went down to see him, I hadn't seen a picture of him, except for his album cover. Back then, he was thin and young. When I saw him, there was this heavy guy hobbling down the street, and I thought, that can't possibly be him. I just stopped and said, Jackson? And it was him. My impression was, oh my god, it was almost like Elephant Man or something. He was so unkempt. He had nothing. It was really sad. We went and had lunch and went back to his room. It almost made me cry, because here was a 50-year-old man, and all he had to his name was a beat-up old suitcase and a broken pair of glasses. I guess his caseworker had given him a $10 guitar, but it wouldn't stay in tune. It was one of those hot summer days. He tried to play Blues Run the Game for me, but his voice was pretty much shot. Abbott became our guy's legal guardian at some point during the 90s, and this brings us to arguably one of the most important areas of his life. Every now and then through the years, attempts had been made for Jackson C. Frank to record new music after his first album. While we'd never get a full-length follow-up, hidden gems would emerge, as that self-titled record would get a CD release, complete with a handful of demos dating back to the 70s. Here in the 90s, Frank would get the opportunity to record another handful of demos during Abbott's guardianship. Some of these would include Night of the Blues, Tumble in the Wind, Half the Distance, and Maria Spanish Rose. Future anthologies would feature these tracks along with early renditions of his 1965 material, an unheard song called Forest of Eden, and a few covers of Elvis. Make no mistake, Abbott's memories are reliable. At this point in time, Frank's ability on the guitar had clearly plummeted, and his voice was a faint portrait of what it had been. However, Frank's emotional intensity, natural sense of melody, and intrinsic gift for lyricism were all still there. These demos not only act as our guy's final musical chapter, but also a stark reminder that inspiration, talent, and a love of the art can persevere despite great tragedy and personal setbacks. Even in his final years, the man possessed an ability and creative wealth that so many people admire today, whether you're a musician yourself or anyone who's connected with the music. Jackson C. Frank died on March 3rd, 1999, from a combination of heart failure and acute pneumonia. It was the day after his 56th birthday. Now, even though Frank never achieved real fame during his lifetime, or the record sales his style likely deserved, plenty of retrospective reviews and new fans have given him and his music a rebirth. Besides cinematic appearances granting audiences a curious look, and bigger icons giving his style a boost, Jackson C. Frank is commonly cited among artists today as one of the greatest folk singers of the 20th century. His signature guitar style, beautiful voice, and haunting lyrics have brought inspiration to so many, including John Mayer, Robin Pecknold, Sandy Denny, Son Volz, and even Joshua Lee Turner. There's so much out there on Mr. Frank to explore, and I encourage you to hear this album in full. It's in the description of this video here today. One more thing you should check out is the book Jackson C. Frank, The Clear, Hard Light of Genius. Not only is this a stellar biography, but it's an incredible primary source, because the author is one of our supporting cast members, Jim Abbott, Frank's guardian in his final years. Do yourself a favor and visit your local library, or purchase a copy while they're still out there. Once again, we've taken a gracious swim into an incredible artist, diving into the life and solitary record of Jackson C. Frank. Though having lived a tragic life and far too short a career, he continues to amaze and inspire countless others today, and we cherish the art and wonder he's brought to us all. Stay tuned for the next artist we cover in this series, but we'll just have to see how it goes. Click on that thumb button, write a comment if you'd like to talk about something, and make sure to subscribe to this TV channel to stay in the loop. We love you, and we appreciate you. This is Jack T. Russell, signing off once again. Good night!